Okay, today we're working on a 2013 Volkswagen Tiguan. When we start this process, the ignition is going to be in the on position, and we follow the on-screen prompts to get to Volkswagen. And we're going to pick automatic selection and then read, and it will pull up the VIN number. When it automatically pulls up the VIN number, that's a good sign that you're going to have good communication. Accept. Now we're going to go to control unit and immobilizer. Note the remote system is available right now. We're going to do automatic selection, and it's going to tell us the instrument cluster type. Please take note of that. That's going to be necessary later on. Now we're going to attempt to go through a backup process of everything that's available to be backed up. If the process at any point fails, you want to have all of the systems backed up that can be affected by the IMMO system. Different vehicles, the IMMO system communicates with other computers, and if you have a failure, you could run into a problem in your other unrelated systems. Now we're going to save the data into a file that we can remember. You don't have to change the name. I always do, so that I know that I'm not saving over a different file. And the other way that you can tell that you're using the latest copy of a file, if there are two files that look similar, is look at the latest timestamp of any file that you've saved. Notice it failed to go into programming mode. Here's where we're going to have to go to the bench at this point. We're going to have to pull the instrument cluster. The IMMO system on this Volkswagen is within that instrument cluster. I included this part of the disassembly because it was very difficult. These dials were difficult to remove, and it looked like they could be damaged. It's best to use plastic to pull them off, and use two to pull them off. If you only use one, then you're putting a side load on the dials, and that could cause them to break. But if you use two pry bars, then you're pulling evenly on the dial, and then you're a lot less likely to break it. Remember, these parts have been out in the sun. They're 10 to 15 years old, and if they can break, they very well might. As you notice, once the dials are removed, it is completely separated, as we've just shown. Okay, now we're hooked up to the instrument cluster. Please note how this is hooked up, because it's going to be hooked up later during the process when we're back in the car. So please make note of how this is. So right now we're going to go through the backup process. We're going to follow the same process as we did in the car. We're going to go to Volkswagen, and then we're going to let the system know what type of Volkswagen that we're working on today. We're going to have to use manual selection because, again, we're on the bench now. We're going to have to tell it what type of vehicle we're working on. We're going to pick Europe because this model of Volkswagen is not available in the US side, so you have to go to Europe. And we're working on it in 2013. And it's populated correctly, so we pick yes. We're going to go back to control unit because we're on the bench. We're going to do a mobilizer. Notice the remote system in the center. The remote is programmed separately, and we don't show this in this video. And on the last screen, that note that I mentioned earlier of the instrument cluster type, that's the selection you want to press so it knows what type of instrument cluster it's working on. Now we're going to go ahead and go through the backup process, because remember, it failed when we were working on the car and not on the bench. So this way, instead of going through OBD, we are reading the EEPROM or the file directly from the instrument cluster. There's no soldering required for this process on this vehicle. So now we're going back in the vehicle, and remember, the instrument cluster, although it's not shown, is hooked up the same way it was before, previous in the video. That cable down to the right goes down to the XP400 that's hooked up, and some of the information that we're going to be reading during this process is coming from that instrument cluster. Now the ignition is on, and we're hooked up to the OBD as well. That's why it's able to read the VIN number, and we are able to use pick automatic selection this time. Remember, the ignition is in the on position. So now as we're going through the process, at a certain point, we're going, remember before we saw on the screen the instrument cluster type. That's what we just pressed just momentarily, that instrument type. We went back to that. Now the 508 has told us to take the instrument cluster from the XP400 and put it back in the instrument panel. When I put it back in the instrument panel, as you can see in the top left of the screen, the instrument cluster is not reassembled. I just connect the cable to the instrument cluster and then set it in place. Once I'm done with this entire process, I will disconnect it and then completely reassemble it. Now during this process, you're just going to follow the on-screen prompts. We're going to be programming just one key today. And then at the end of this process, as you see it progress, it's going to attempt to read the ABS data again. That's going to fail, but that will have no effect on this process. This screen right here is for informational purposes only at this point. We don't need to access the PIN number or the CS code. That is only if something goes wrong, we would need that code. In this instance, we do not need it. So now we're going to make one key at this point. We're going to take the key out of the ignition. It's been in the on position for this whole process. We're going to put it in the XP400, and that is going to start the process of making that one key. Okay, that was successful. And we're going to take the key out of the programmer and put it back into the ignition and then turn it to the on position. And we have a blade key. We cannot start the car with the key not in the ignition. We're only making one key in this process. But if you were making two, you would have selected two at that point, and then follow the screen prompts to move the key, take one key out and put the other key in. Okay, that was accepted. Okay, it's going to attempt to read the ABS code. That's going to fail. That will have no effect on this process. Just accept that and move forward. And don't try to read it again. And the process is finished at this point. We're going to test the keys. Even though we're testing the remotes now and that's not shown, we didn't do it during this process. We did it during a separate process. But we're going to turn the ignition on. The instrument cluster has been reassembled and is put back in the vehicle, and we have a running car, so our job is done. Thank you for watching.